it was not wrong for them to ask for a king. The problem was not in their request. The problem was the motivation behind the request, namely that it came from a place of fear, not faith. 1 Samuel chapter 8, I'm reading a great book right now called The 90s by Chuck Klosterman. And one of the things that the author points out is that my generation, known usually as Generation X, will probably go down, he says, as the generation who experienced the most dramatic technological and scientific shifts in history. Gen Xers, along with some of the baby boomers and maybe a few of the millennials, Xennials, I think they're called, the ones right between the millennial and Gen X generation. We're the only ones that really fully experienced the world without the internet and cell phones, and then a world with those things. Most of you millennials and all of you Gen Zers, for the most part, have never really known a world without those things. And I know this makes me sound like a cranky old man, but people my age remember when the only place you could receive a phone call was at home. You all remember that? And if you were waiting on an important phone call, you literally would not leave your house. Also, once you left the house, whatever plans you had made with somebody were fixed. There was no, hey, I'm running 5 minutes late, or hey, let's meet at Chipotle instead of at Panera. Back then, it was back then when fast food was actually fast, and it never even pretended to be healthy and didn't cost like $18 for just one person. Any of you Gen Xers or boomers remember how when you wanted to go on a road trip, there was no Google or Apple Maps. You got one of those giant unfolding atlas maps and spread it out across your dashboard and charted your course like you were Christopher Columbus. How many marriages almost ended trying to interpret one of those things? My parents had an awesome marriage, but man, I remember listening to some spicy conversations from the back seat. By the way, just out of curiosity, how many of you have one of those in your car right now? Just go ahead and be honest. That's amazing. I mean, they never run out of batteries. I will have to give them that. If you wanted to go on vacation, there was no jumping online and searching for hotels on Expedia. You had to dial up an operator and get the number of a Holiday Inn in the city you wanted to go to and book a reservation that way, or hire a travel agent. Or you could just show up in a city and hope for the best. I can remember my parents and I going from hotel to hotel to see who had rooms, like we were Mary and Joseph or something. You millennials and you Gen Zers, I'm telling you, you have it so easy. And stay off my lawn, okay? So another thing that we had to deal with was the onset of computer viruses. We didn't have all the fancy programs to block them that we have now. Plus, this was all so new, so we were still so gullible because we just didn't understand how viruses work. So we'd be like what? A Nigerian prince wants to wire me $1 million? I should at least have the decency to open up this attachment and check it out. There was this one virus that would take over your email and start emailing all your friends solicitations for money or lewd pictures from your account. I got one from Danny Aiken, the president of Southeastern Seminary, requesting a dog sitter for his uncle's English bulldog. And he said, I will pay you $300 a week if I would just wire my bank account info to him. He would, put the money right into my account. And of course, Danny Aiken did not need a dog sitter. He just needed updated virus protection software. One of the worst computer virus stories that I heard was from a friend who was working on his master's degree thesis. He said that he was putting the final touches on his term paper when suddenly he watched as every single line of his paper methodically turned into a series of X's and O's, because his computer had downloaded a virus that systematically erased his computer's entire memory. And this was before Google Drive and automatic backups and all that kind of stuff, which meant his entire paper, the grade for the whole class, was gone. He had to start over completely. How many of you had something similar happen like that at some point in your career? Well, the reason that I take you on down this little trip down memory lane, or for you Gen Zers, into this foray into the land before time, is because Israel's demand for a king that we're gonna see in 1 Samuel chapter 8 is gonna function like a computer virus. That king is gonna promise so much, and it's gonna look so appealing, like he can do so much for them. But when they download him into their system, he's just gonna take over and destroy everything. Let's start reading 1 Samuel chapter 8. We're gonna pick up in verse 4. Here's how it starts. Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah, verse 5, and said to him, Behold, Samuel, you are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint for us a king to judge us like all the nations. That's a very important phrase in this story. But let's keep reading verse 6. But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, give us a king to judge us, because his feelings were hurt. He felt like it was a personal rejection of him. So Samuel prayed to the Lord. Then the Lord said to Samuel, no, obey the voice of the people and all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, Samuel. They've actually rejected me from being king over them. First thing I want to clear up, because a lot of people get this wrong. It was not categorically wrong for Israel to ask for a king. That is a very common misconception. It was not wrong for them to ask for a king. Here's why I say that. In the book of Deuteronomy, earlier in the Bible, God had actually told them that one day he would provide for them a king. Deuteronomy 17 even lays out for them the characteristics of the king that they should look for. So it was not wrong for them to ask for a king. The problem was not in their request. The problem was the motivation behind the request, namely that it came from a place of fear, not faith. They were not saying, hey, God, we're just asking for the king that you promised, but only on your timetable and only by according to your choice because we trust you. No, they were demanding a king for two reasons. The first one you see there in verse 5. We want to be like the other nations. And in verse 20, they even clarify that. It's the second reason. We want to be like the other nations, that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles. They looked around at other nations and they saw that, well, the other nations had a king that seemed to give that nation a sense of national pride, an identity, somebody to look up to and just really have your heart swell with pride when you saw him, a king that rode out into battle for them and guaranteed their security. Now, of course, that was all untrue. It was an illusion. Lots of nations had kings and did not experience those things. But Israel thought they needed one. All they had, they were like, all we got are the promises of some invisible God. This is all we got. They wanted a king that they could see and touch and put their pride in. As you see in this passage, God considered this a rejection of him. Israel wasn't supposed to be like the other nations. They were supposed to be different. They were supposed to be set apart. They were supposed to be distinctive. And how were they supposed to be set apart and distinctive? Well, they weren't supposed to trust in the same things the other nations trusted in. They weren't supposed to feel secure because of the size of their army like the other nations. They weren't supposed to be constantly and feverishly striving to achieve great things in order to give themselves a sense of identity and pride in front of the other nations. No, their relationship with God was supposed to give them those things. So God says, they've rejected me. Verse 8, according to all the deeds that they have done from the day that I brought them up out of Egypt unto this day, forsaking me and serving other gods. So now, Samuel, they're also doing to you. From the very beginning, God says, from the very beginning of my relationship with them, I've never been enough for them.